Hey guys, it's Mike, and you're watching That's Cool Vintage Collectibles. If you're new to the channel, please give us a like and subscribe. Today on the show, I'm going to talk about a viewer comment that I got, and it asked me which Beatle album was my favorite, and I thought that'd be a great video, so I'm going to tell you today which one is my favorite. Stay tuned. So I don't usually go in for lists on, what is the top 5 Beatle records, that, kind of thing. Because I think every time they released an album, it was the most important music up to that point. I think every release the Beatles made was a truly landmark innovation in music, and the whole music industry was trying to catch up most of the time to what they were doing. Even when they were inspired by something else, they often did it a little bit better. And the innovation and quality of the songwriting was always so strong that it's still a high watermark today. So I don't think it's possible to kind of rank the Beatle albums, because I think for each era and each year they released an album, the musical landscape had changed and things were different. I don't think you can compare the early releases to the later releases. It's just a different time in music, but thanks to them primarily. So that's kind of how I view that. But the record that I find is, to me, my favorite and the best collection of songs would be from 1966, and I think it's Revolver. That would be my favorite record. Some people might not think that, but that's fine. We each have our opinion. I think this is a really strong album and one of the best ever made by anybody, and I'll give you a few reasons why I really like this record. So in 1966, early garage rock, folk rock, psychedelic rock was all starting to become mainstream music. I'm going to show you some of the albums that were big around the time of the release of Revolver. In garage rock, you had bands such as the Bobby Fuller Four releasing I Fought the Law, and Question Mark and the Mysterians with 96 Tears. You had the Outsiders, Time Won't Let Me. Paul Revere and the Raiders did Kicks at that time, their big single, and the Standells released Dirty Water off of that album, and that was all starting to happen. One of the biggest garage rock classics at that time, though, and of all time, was the Troggs' Wild Thing. That was also released at that period. As far as experimentalism and, sort of stuff stretching the boundaries, Frank Zappa and the Mothers of Invention released Freak Out in 1966. And you could feel the psychedelic movement starting to happen a little bit within music. 13th Floor Elevators came out in 1966. And so did the Byrds' Fifth Dimension, which has the song 8 Miles High, which is a psychedelic masterpiece of jazz fusion guitar, and definitely an inspiration for songs on Revolver such as And Your Bird Can Sing. The Rolling Stones had just released Aftermath and the track Paint It Black, which was their sort of counterpunch to the Beatles' previous release, Norwegian Wood. And we start to see the Stones continuing to follow in what the Beatles were creating at that time. Folk rock was very big. Dylan released Blonde on Blonde, and right around that time, Love put out Da Capo. The Lovin' Spoonful had a hit with Summer in the City off of Hums of the Lovin' Spoonful, and Monday Monday was out with the Mamas and the Papas. So lots of good music being released. Motown, the Supremes were doing very well. But the album that likely influenced Revolver the most was released in March of '66, and this is the Beach Boys' Pet Sounds. And it's the first album that really was designed to never be performed. And that was what spearheaded the Beatles to start writing music that wouldn't need to be performed on stage, and that's where you get the expansive sounds on Revolver. That's one of the reasons I think that record is so interesting, is because it had such a degree of complicated arrangements and musical pieces that it was really difficult to perform. So another reason why I enjoy that record. The two singles off of Revolver really indicate where the music was heading to and the complexity of the writing. The first one was Paperback Writer, with the B-side being Rain. And those are two tracks that have tons of guitar layers and vocal overdubs and some backwards guitar and things like that. Very interesting recordings. And the other one that came out at that time was Eleanor Rigby with Yellow Submarine, and both songs that weren't going to be able to be performed. So these were really a good indicator of where the music was headed and the complexity of the writing and just the difficulty in which it would be to recreate these in a live setting. But it also pushed music into new boundaries and new levels of complexity and rhythm structures. So finally, in 1966, Revolver is released, and it's just a fantastic record. We're going to talk a little bit more about the record in a second, but the album artwork and jacket are pretty interesting too, and very innovative for the time. I just showed you a whole bunch of album covers, and nothing really looks like this. And this would probably inspire records later, like Cream's Disraeli Gears and Wheels of Fire, things like that. But at the time, very innovative, and this was done by a fellow named Klaus Wurman, who was a friend of the group back in their German days, and when they were playing in Germany. And he was also in the Plastic Ono band for a while, and some of John Lennon's solo recordings. He was also on some of George Harrison's solo recordings. And I reached out to Klaus about 15 years ago and asked him to sign this photo for me, and he graciously did do that, and I'm very, very grateful that he did that. Such a cool thing to have in my collection. And I told him at the time how I collected things, and I'm also a music teacher, so he was very interested in that, and I run my own private music school and things like that, so he was pretty interested in that, and he actually wrote on the back, "Good luck with your school," which is pretty cool. And so Klaus Wurman coming through big for the collection there. Okay, so I have two pressings of Revolver. This is a first edition Capitol Records Canadian pressing, and as far as I know, that's the same as the American one, I think. And Capitol, always in their infinite wisdom, decided to butcher up their records, and more on that on another video. And I'll decide which ones they were going to include. So omitted from this recording is "I'm Only Sleeping," Dr. Robert, and Your Bird Can Sing. Those three songs are not on this recording, which is too bad, because they're really good songs, and they do help the album's flow, and I'm surprised they took them off when they obviously could fit, because they fit on the British version. So that is the North American pressing on Capitol. The UK pressing, I have an original UK stereo pressing of Revolver, and those three songs are on there. So a little bit more material on this album, and the mix, I believe, is a little more what the Beatles had intended. But I like stereo stuff. A lot of people will say mono's the way they intended it to be heard, and I don't know, this sounds pretty good to my ears. I like the stereo pressing of Revolver just fine. So that is the UK original 1966 pressing of my favorite Beatle record, Revolver. As far as the tracks go on Revolver, I think it's a really interesting, diverse track listing. And you have 14 songs that are just so diverse in their approach and their writing and even their musical styles and genres. It's really an interesting listen. Probably why I really enjoy the record. I like switching gears in a listen, when I'm listening to things. I like going one to the other, and hearing these. And so you have George Harrison songs like Taxman and I Want to Tell You, which are great guitar-based songs. Paul McCartney's solo in Taxman is really off the charts, very cool. And then you also have him, in his Indian styles of writing with Love You Too and the sitar-driven Eastern style of music coming in there. It's very interesting. John Lennon's contributions are very dark and psychedelic, and songs like Tomorrow Never Knows, which is completely revolutionary for as far as recording and backwards recording, and playing a song that only has one chord, which was also Indian influenced. It's pretty interesting, and the drugged out "I'm Only Sleeping," that slow churning but continually driving song. Like, some really complex stuff going on and interesting writing from Lennon. And Paul McCartney is the counterbalance to that, with some wonderful pop songs that really are unmatchable in a lot of other types of music. And you hear songs like Eleanor Rigby and Here, There, and Everywhere, and Good Day Sunshine, and Got to Get You Into My Life, like great McCartney songs. And of course, Yellow Submarine is on this album, which became a classic a couple of years later when they eventually used that in the movie. So there's a lot of things on this album that I think really do set it aside from other Beatle recordings, where it just really, to me, is a lovely in sync record. There's no filler, there's no time where you think I'm just going to skip that track and go to the next one. It just flows so well, and yet is so different and complex and varied in its style. So it's a recording to me that's very unmatched by a lot of other groups, and they're exploring a ton of different influences, and it's, to me, just a way that the Beatles were just masters of writing perfect rock and pop music. So there you have it. That is my favorite Beatle record. Is it the best? Not sure. It's certainly up there, and if you compare it to what was being out in the musical landscape at the time, it's up there. That's for sure. It's considered one of the greatest records ever made, and I can't argue with that one bit. I think it's a phenomenal release. Let me know in the comments what your favorites are and what your favorites from 1966 were. It'd be pretty interesting for me to see what you guys like and what you think your favorite Beatle record is. This is a brand new channel. I just started this in late December, and I'm just getting rolling with things. So if you like vintage collectibles of all kinds, I do rock and roll memorabilia, records, guitars, sports memorabilia, historical items, antiques, pop culture, and more. And if you're interested in that sort of stuff, this channel is designed to talk about all those types of things and show you pieces of my own collection that go with it. So if you like that, give us a like and subscribe, and keep on collecting.